Why did you take the decision to pile the bodies on top of each other in a freezer?
What do you mean?
Why did you do that?
Well, I only had one deep freezer. I mean, take the decision to pile the bodies on top of each other. Where was she gonna go?
How did you conceivably sleep at night?
I slept well.
This is the case of Mitchelle Blair, aka the House of Horrors. As a child, Blair was a victim of sexual abuse. Blair said that she told her mother when she was a child about the abuse, but her mother said that it's over with and what does she expect her to do about it. Blair goes on to say that she still had to see the person that did this to her, as they used to come round her house all the time. It's believed from what Blair said there was numerous people involved in her abuse as a child. She later tried to tell her mother again when she was a teenager, but nothing changed with her mother. Blair later went on to have 4 children of her own, with 2 different fathers, Alexandra and Steve. The fathers, however, wasn't present in the children's lives, and they didn't contribute to the children's upbringing financially or emotionally. In 2002 and again in 2005, Blair was investigated for child abuse against her own children. The authorities said that they found Blair guilty of this abuse. However, the children weren't removed from the home. Blair had to attend some kind of parental classes. Now, Blair did remove her children from school in 2013. I did read that in Michigan, you don't actually have to inform the state or anyone if you want to homeschool your children or educate them however you feel fit. You can just take them out of school and that's it. I find this interesting because where I am, you just wouldn't be allowed to do this. But this does explain a few things throughout this episode. In March 2015, on the 24th of March to be precise, the then 35-year-old Blair was round her friend's house with 2 of her children. Now at the same time, there was 2 bailiffs/court deputies from the 36th District Court knocking on Blair's front door. Now she lived in a townhouse on the Lower East Side of Detroit. They were at her front door to evict her and her children. Blair owed $2,206 in back rent, so the court deputies were ready and waiting to serve Blair with an eviction paper. When the court deputy knocked, nobody answered, so they gained entry to the property. They went inside and discovered an unkept, dirty house. They began removing items from the house and put them in the front yard. They noticed that there was a freezer in the living room. They tried to move it into the front yard, but it was just too heavy. So they decided to empty it first. When they opened the freezer door, they made a horrifying discovery. Inside the freezer lay the frozen body of a young teenage girl. She was wrapped in plastic bags and a cloth round her neck. Now, in complete shock at what they just discovered, they called the police. When the police arrived, they were horrified to discover this young girl's body. When they removed the body from the freezer, they discovered a second body underneath the teenage girl. This was the body of a little boy wrapped in a bed cover. Now, the bodies were taken to the morgue so that an autopsy could be performed. It would then take a further 3 days of waiting for the bodies to thaw out before any cause of death could be determined. The bodies were identified as 2 of Blair's children. The girl was Stony Blair, age 13, and she had been in the freezer for 2 years, since 2013. Now, the little boy's body was underneath his sister, and he was 9-year-old Stephen Berry, and he'd been in the freezer since August 2012. Now, the cause of death to both children was ruled as homicide. They died from multiple blunt trauma and multiple blunt trauma with thermal injuries. Stephen's body was wrapped in a blanket at the bottom of the freezer. Investigators believed that he was scalded with hot water, which would have caused his thermal injuries. He was also beaten and strangled in 2012. On top of his body was his sister's, which was covered in a plastic bag and also had a cloth wrapped around her neck. She had scars to her face and her shoulders, and she appeared to have been beaten and strangled too. Both bodies were formally identified. Now, the police went round the neighbour's house and asked where Blair was. As soon as they found out what she had done, or believed to have done, they soon told the police where she was. The police then arrested Blair. This was only on charges of child abuse to start with. Now, while in custody, Blair confessed to killing her children, and she goes on to say that they're demons. Blair's older child, the surviving child, told the police that her mother would punish Stephen, her 9-year-old brother, by putting a plastic bag over his head until he would become unconscious. She would then wake him up by repeatedly hitting him. She would then go on to pour boiling water over Stephen's genitals. This would cause Stephen's skin to peel. He was viciously kicked and punched repeatedly. He would also be forced to drink Windex. Now, Blair then tied a belt around Stephen's neck and lifted him off the ground. Blair tortured and beat her 9-year-old child for 2 whole weeks. Stephen succumbed to his injuries and sadly passed away on August the 30th, 2012. Blair then wrapped Stephen's body in his favourite cover and placed him inside the freezer. Now, Blair admitted this in court, and we will hear later in the episode why. 9 months after Blair had killed her son Stephen, she would make her move on Stoney, her 13-year-old daughter. She would attack her daughter, starve her daughter. She would strangle her with a t-shirt. She would kick and punch her and put a plastic bag over her head. Her 13-year-old daughter struggled to breathe. As the bag was over Stoney's head, Stoney sadly passed away. Blair then involved her oldest daughter and made her lift Stoney's body into the freezer. Stoney was killed on the 25th of May 2013. For almost 3 years, Stephen and Stoney was inside the freezer in the living room, while Blair and her other 2 children lived in the house. Blair's children never played outside. They were never a sociable family. They never went to the doctors for checkups, and if anyone asked where Blair's children was, she would come up with some kind of excuse, such as their auntie was looking after them. They easily went unnoticed for 2 years. Blair's family said that Blair never had any money. She would also borrow money off them all the time. And this come to the point where they just had enough and they told her to just get a job. Now, I'm not sure why she didn't get a job. If she was struggling, I can only think that maybe she didn't want anyone in her house because the state of the house. And also, if they was looking after the children in the house and they wanted to cook the children food, they would possibly go inside the freezer and discover Stoney and Stephen. I honestly just don't know. All I know is this woman made me beyond angry. Blair received $771 a month in food assistance and Medicaid, and the government benefits she received was also for her 2 deceased children. Now, when Blair appeared in court in June 2015, she pleaded guilty to 2 accounts of first-degree murder, which was premeditated murder. Now, when Blair was before the Judge Dana Hathaway, she was actually incredibly vocal, and I will try to insert some audio on this, if it works. Now, she explained the reasons why committing these horrendous acts. In court, Blair said, when asked, "Why did you kill your children?" Blair explains that she came home in August in 2012 to find her younger son playing with dolls. He had placed these dolls in sexual positions, and Blair asked, "Why are you doing this? Has anyone done this to you? Blair then said her younger son replied, yes, Stephen does this to me. And later, Blair said that she found out that Stoney was allegedly sexually abusing her younger brother too. Now, the prosecution states that there is no evidence to back up this claim. Blair didn't report this to the police, and in no way has there been any evidence shown this to be true. The only abuse found to have happened to the children is the abuse that Blair actually inflicted herself on her own kids. Now, even the 2 surviving children didn't back up these claims. And when they were in counselling, one of the children was one of the children that was allegedly abused, sexually abused. He didn't admit to it. He didn't say anything about the abuse, and neither did the daughter. They just spoke about what the mother did to them. In fact, the 2 surviving children were beaten with extension cords, planks of wood, and curling irons. They both had numerous scars on their bodies due to the abuse. Now, their mother had put them through horrendous ordeals. The little boy who Blair said was abused, the one that she described as sweet and such a good boy, this little boy had 25 scars on his back. Now, when examined, was consistent with an extension cord. She had beat him with this extension cord. Blair's story is so confusing to me. She says she protects her son, but really her son just needed protecting from her. Now, Blair did admit pouring boiling water over her children and beating them. She beat them with sticks and tortured them, and she placed plastic bags over their head. A full autopsy of Stephen and Stoney revealed a lifetime of abuse by their mother. The medical examiner found that Stoney had a fractured arm at some point in her life, but couldn't point to when. They did say that Stoney never received medical attention for this fracture, and this would have caused the little girl excruciating amount of pain while it was healing. Stoney also had a freshly carved out tissue on her shoulder. Now, this is believed to be caused from some form of liquid being poured onto her skin. Stoney's ear had missing tissue as well, and it looked like it either had been ripped off or chewed. Stoney and Stephen both had scars on the inside of their mouth. They had both been starved and had chipped teeth. They'd also been repeatedly kicked and punched numerous times. Now, the pathologist said that Stoney was starved for so long, her ribs were sticking out, and her body had consumed itself of energy. She had only 5 millimeters of fat padding to her stomach. Now, both children were beaten so badly around the head, this caused death. Now, Stephen's burns had contributed to his death. But overall, both children suffered in a horrendous way. From being burnt so badly, even the pathologist couldn't tell one scar from another because they both ran into each other. There were so many of them. Stephen had burns to his tummy, his buttocks, and his genitals. Now, it's revealed that Blair called the police at some point before she actually killed her 2 children. And she wanted to say, or she actually wanted to find out what would happen. So she phoned up the police and said that her friend was sexually abusing her children, and what would happen to her friend. Now, the police said that they would remove the children from the home and obviously press charges to the person. Now, Blair actually ended the conversation with the police officer and hung up just before they could identify any information who she was. A social worker spoke in court regarding the visit of the family that had took place in 2002 and 2005. Now, Mrs. Hayden said she was a social worker with the Child Protection Services, and she can reveal there was an investigation into Blair in 2002 after receiving complaints of abuse stemming from burns of the hands of her children. Now, Blair's daughter, what happened after CPS confirmed the abuse, it's unclear what happened because Hayden said that the file on the children had been destroyed. Now, the CPS investigated again and confirmed that there was another report of abuse in 2005. Now, I believe that the children were with the father's sister, and I think she was like giving him a bath, and then she found lots of scars on their back, and she reported it. And then Blair received services, which I believe are parenting classes, but I could be wrong. So following the investigations, there was a petition, but never a file to remove custody of these children, which is horrendous. I also found out that the auntie that took in the children after the court case, now she was actually a retired Detroit police child abuse investigator. Now, I'm not saying this happened, because obviously I don't know, but surely if a file was destroyed that was part of the social services, a child protection officer would be the person who could get their hands on it. But I could be wrong. Now, during the hearing, the two fathers of the children, they did actually speak. And during Alexander's hearing, Mitchelle actually verbally attacked him and said that he was an alcoholic and he'd never cared for his children in any way, and he didn't deserve any custody of his children. This actually caused her to be removed from the hearing itself. Now, Alexandra's rights were revoked by the court, possibly because the oldest daughter then had graduated school and she was actually eligible for college for 2 years and continuing with her medical health treatment, which I think is great that they did this. And she also was under the care of the state, and she was classed as an orphan. And this was so that she could continue getting this help. Now, Stephen, the other dad, his rights were upheld, and he said that he wanted to take care of his son, but he just couldn't at the minute. He needed to build a relationship with his son. Now, his son actually went on to be adopted, but there's no sort of where did he go? Because, no one needs to know where he's gone. He just needs to live a better life. Blair lost all custody and rights over her 2 surviving children. And thank goodness that happened, hey? I'm going to try and insert some video clips of her in court saying why she committed this crime. And you could see she's so aggressive and horrible.
Did you ever actually see anything of any sexual abuse of any kind between either Stephen and Stoney and Matthew?
I reject her question, but I will answer it because no one will say that this did not happen because it actually did.
I just want to have a clear record. Because so far, all you've told me was that you just heard it. Did you ever
and that they admitted it. No, I did not. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I understand.
But as I went back in my head and thought back to all the many things that was wrong with Matthew over the years, and I'm like, that's what was wrong with you? He'd use the bathroom and say, Mom, my butt hurts when I poop. I don't know, Matthew. So I started giving him 100% juice to make his stool softer, maybe to help him use. But that wasn't the problem. It wasn't his stool. It was that he was being raped. Okay? My son looked me in my eyes and he gave me a very detailed account of everything they did. Matthew is not a violent boy. He is a very sweet little boy. So for him to stand there and look at me and say, do it again, he was hurting. Okay. At a certain point, I told him to stop talking. And I said, Stoney, you tell me what the fuck you did to my son. And I said, Matthew, if she's saying anything that's not right, tell me. she started telling me many things. And I also asked her, so why didn't Stephen tell me that when I asked him, did anybody do this to him? Why didn't he tell me that you did it to him? Because Stoney was going upstairs, beating Stephen's ass, threatening him. Basically, at a certain point, after I was hitting Stephen, I didn't want to look at him. I didn't want to look at him. So I told him to go to his room. When it came time to eat, I didn't want to take no food up. So I sent Stoney up because she volunteered, not knowing at that time that Stoney was raping either of them. But every time she went upstairs, I wouldn't have known if she hit him or not because I had put many bruises on him. So every time she went upstairs, she admitted to me that she was hitting him also, knocking the hell out of him, telling him, you better not tell her nothing. You get what I'm saying?
I understand. When she admitted these things to you, were you always being physical with her?
The first time, no. We were sitting there.
Okay.
She denied it constantly. I'm like, Stoney, you better tell me the fucking truth. Matthew's sitting here. He don't know nothing about it. He constantly, you get what I'm saying? Who would admit that? Who would admit that if they did not do it?
All right, tell me what happened to Stephen.
I came home one day. My daughter, Gabrielle, my oldest, met me at the door, and she's like, Mom, come see what Maddie doing with his dials. And I'm like, what is he doing? He was making one dial, his little wrestle man, hump on top of the other. No, I'm like, Maddie, why was you doing that? I said, anybody ever do this to you? He said, no. I said, then why are you doing that? And he said, yes, Stephen did. And I was like, so this is the first I'm hearing about that, period. This was 9 months before Stoney. Okay, Stoney wasn't downstairs, and she was always in the background. I wish to God I had questioned everybody together, but I didn't.
Would you say this was around August 30th, 2012?
No, this was before August 30th. August 30th is when he died.
Okay.
This was maybe a week and a half.
Before he died?
Yes.
Okay. So that, Matthew telling you that set off some action?
Yes, I went upstairs because Stephen was upstairs in his and Matthew's room. And I went upstairs and I said, Stephen, Matthew said you was humping on him. And then Stephen stood up and he looked at me, and right then I could tell something was wrong in his face because he was just like this. Ain't normal kid. I know my kid would have been like, what? That's not what he did. He stood up and looked at me like he done lost his mind. Okay? And it just, hearing that from him had me fucked up in my head, period. But I asked him, I said, Stephen, tell me the fucking truth. Was you humping on Matthew? He said, yes, but that was all. And I said, did you hump on him with your underwear off? He said, no. Matthew yelled out, yes, he did. And I just remember going in the hallway, walking back and forth, and I walked back up and I was like, you fucked your brother? You get what I'm saying? You fucked your brother. So I'm looking at them too. I'm looking at them like, what? I can't understand. So I started punching Stephen. You know, I'm like, what the fuck is you doing to him? I just started asking him questions. Matthew, at this point, is just spilling out. He's just spilling out. And Mom, and he's doing like this, and he do this thing almost every night. He tell me how he was, the reason I put bags over Stephen's head, because if we had Maddie, I thought Maddie peed in the bed. My son was never a bedwetter. Didn't know it was Stephen waking up every morning, pissing on Matthew like he was a damn piece of shit, okay? They had bunk beds. Stephen would get out the bed in the middle of the night. You would rape him in his own bed. You would pee on him instead of going to the bathroom. I'm waking up every morning thinking Matthew's a bedwetter. So we just wash him up and go, you a bedwetter.
Let's talk about what you did to Stephen.
The reason I put bags over Stephen's head because my son told me that the plastic on his bed, because I thought he was a bedwetter, he said, sometimes, Mom, I couldn't breathe. Stephen was laying on me and he had my face down and the plastic on the bed. I couldn't breathe and he was humping on my butt like a basketball. That's when I got a garbage bag and started putting it over Stephen's head. And I started asking him, bitch, you know what I'm saying? You see what this feel like? You can't breathe? You stop at that's my son. You could not breathe on top of getting raped. You was 6 years old at the time. You get what I'm saying? So I put a bag over his head. He lost consciousness. I did that a couple times. He told me that Maddie would be face down. He had stuff around his neck. So I grabbed Stephen, I grabbed a belt, and I put a belt around his neck, and I lifted him up like, do you like how this feels, being choked with a belt? So I dropped him. I held him up until he lost consciousness as well.
You were intending to...
No, I did not intend.
No, I'm not. Listen to my question. You were intending to inflict serious physical harm, but not kill him.
Definitely.
Okay. Did you also punch him?
Yes, I did. Multiple
also kick
times.
him?
Yes, I did.
You talked about choking him. Did you also burn him?
Yes, I did.
Okay, how did you do that?
Hot water, scalding hot water. In our bathroom, the hot water gets extremely hot. So, his private area, I stood him in the bathtub naked. You fucked up my son with your dick, you know? So yes, I threw hot water in his genital area multiple times. Every time Stephen peed in my son's eyes. He put his dick in his ears, his nose. He peed. Matthew even told me one time, Mom, and in my eyes, he said it was gooey, but it wasn't pee. And then right then, it was like, I didn't even know a 9-year-old could ejaculate. You get what I'm saying? So not only did you do that, you done it in my son's eyes. So my son had to go through all this shit. So yes, I threw hot water on him repeatedly.
Did you make him burn?
Yes, it did. His skin came off.
Did you
His
also
skin
make
came
him
off.
drink Windex?
Yes, I did, because Matthew told me in the middle of the night he had took him in the basement and he made him drink the blue stuff from under the sink. And I'm like, what blue stuff? So I walked Maddie downstairs. He showed me what I said. You made Maddie drink fucking Windex. And then I went back to like years before, and I'm like, is this what was wrong with him? I thought Matthew had the stomach flu, where you vomit and have diarrhea. Get at the same time. At that time, this is what was going around. A lot of people had it, so this is what I thought Matthew had. He didn't. Stephen made him drink Windex. So yes, I made that boy drink Windex.
You knew you were seriously harming him, but you didn't intend to murder him.
No.
Okay. But your actions ultimately caused his death.
Yes, they did.
Okay. Were you Stephen's mother?
Yes.
He was in your custody?
I don't claim him as my son now, and I do not claim Stoney as my daughter. I have 2 children. That's it. Stephen and Stoney are demons. Period.
Listen to my question. At the time he died, he was in your custody or care?
Yes.
How old was he?
Stephen was 9.
And again, did this happen at your house in the city of Detroit?
Yes.
What you did to Stephen was punishment for what you did to Maddie. Is that right?
For what he did to Maddie.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
For what Stephen did to
Yes.
Maddie. That was punishment. All
And
right.
if I had killed Stephen intentionally, I definitely would be proud to say I did. But I didn't. But I know all the things that I did to him, how I hurt him, I know it did cause his death. You know what I'm saying? It was like that day. Now, Stoney, I did starve her. I did. 9 more months, you going, your big ass, she was 13. My son told me how she used to sit on his face, and he said, Mom, it stinks real bad. And she was, you know what I'm saying? Fuck that. Yes, I did. Then oatmeal is all that girl got. And she's lucky she got that once a day.
Stoney only got oatmeal? Is that what you're saying?
Oatmeal once a day. She's very lucky she got that. And I used to have to hide the fact that I was giving her oatmeal for Matthew because he didn't want me to feed her, and he had every right to feel that way.
Hold on. Just Blair, can we get...
No, I'm good.
You're okay? Okay. I just have a few more questions. When you were physically harming Stephen, was it ever your intent to also cause any sort of serious mental harm?
She said, well, I don't understand what you mean.
When you were hurting him physically, was it also your intent to cause any sort of serious mental harm?
What do you mean, mentally damage him?
Yes.
Like beating him in the head?
No? Like making it so that his thoughts aren't right.
No,
That
never.
makes sense? Okay.
Physical punishment on what you did to my child, because I had always told my kids the worst thing you can ever do to somebody is break them. I always told my son that, and I always told the girls the worst thing you could do is cry rape on somebody if they didn't rape. They fully knew what they were doing.
Blair's defense attorney, his name is Wyatt Harris, and he did try to say that Blair was abused as a child and she was very poorly educated, and when she had children, she just wasn't prepared to deal with any situation. Now, the judge, Dana Hathaway, she said, as a mother, it is your job to protect your children. and you failed in the worst way. The judge also said that Mitchelle Blair would be sentenced to 2 terms of life in prison without the possibility of parole, and she would go to Michigan Department of Corrections. And this would mean that she would never, ever be released from prison. Now, the judge then said that despite what happened to you as a child, you had the opportunity to grow up. You had the opportunity to become an adult, to make your own decisions, to run your own life, and have 4 children. Stoney and Stephen will never have that. She also said, thankfully, the house of horrors you created is no longer in existence. Now, friends and family spoke out, said that they never knew what was going on in the house. And they stated that they never saw Blair's children playing outside, like I said. Now, Blair has shown absolutely no remorse for killing her own children, and she even referred to them still as demons. Now, if you can still stick around while we're talking about this, thanks, because this is a horrible case, I do know. Now, I'm possibly wrong here, but the medical examiner deemed her fit to stand trial and basically said that she was fine. Now, I don't think she's fine at all. I don't understand this woman in one bit. I don't know if... Now, I watched interviews of Blair, and she spoke about the abuse her child suffered and the abuse she suffered as a child. But it seemed in her interviews that she's actually getting confused with her abuse and not her children's abuse. Now, it felt to me that she was talking about a demon inside her head, and she was getting confused and putting it onto her children. Because remember, there is no evidence to back up this claim of abuse. But again, she was found mentally able to continue. The 2 surviving children received therapy and are doing well, it seems. Now, the girl is going to college, and that's just really good news. I really am pleased for her. And the little boy has been adopted, like I said, and I really hope to God that they get the love and support and they have a happy life ahead of them, because they've been through so much. So thank you all for sticking around for so long. I know this has been a horrendous case, but I will be back next week with another case, and I wish you all a wonderful week ahead of you. So much love, Lindsay.